Hey guys, Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. I'm often asked about the indicator called RSI, the Relative Strength Index, and particularly, is it a good thing or a bad thing when a stock becomes overbought? So the technical analysis toolkit is filled with different technical indicators. A lot of them are lagging indicators like moving averages. Some of them are price oriented like support and resistance levels or Fibonacci retracements. But a set of technical tools are really, I think, considered more leading indicators, trying to help you anticipate when a turn may be coming or when a shift may be starting to happen. RSI can be used in that sort of way as a leading indicator. And when people talk about a stock being overbought or oversold, I would say it sort of talks about less what may come next and more describing what has just happened, right? It tells you the conditions are a certain configuration, and it helps you understand what is the likely scenario that may be coming next. I'll show you what I mean on the chart here and why a stock becoming overbought might actually be a good thing, not a bad thing. Before we get there, if you like this sort of thinking about technical analysis, behavioral finance, investor psychology, won't you subscribe to my channel? Also, give the video a like if you appreciate it. We'd very much appreciate that back. Put a comment below. What do you think about the stocks I'm about to show you as these examples? Now, looking at the chart here, we're starting with Pulte Home Group. Pulte Home Group is one of the strongest trends that we've seen, certainly in 2023, but particularly in March and April, right? And as we get into late April here, you're seeing the home builders just rally to the upside aggressively. And it's a great reminder that, you know, the market doesn't care what you think should work or could work. Things happen, right? And so gold stocks, home builders, semiconductors at times have been some of the strongest stocks within 2023. It's not up to us to figure out whether, why that makes sense or something. Maybe that is, something we can do to help understand it. But really, I think the game is more to help focus on those names that are working and make sure you identify those trends and follow those trends as long as possible. The RSI indicator is here in the middle panel. We have price at the top with the 50 and 200-day moving averages. Then we have RSI, the Relative Strength Index, and that's very different from the bottom panel, which is actually called Relative Strength or Relative Performance, which is looking at a stock versus a benchmark, right? So here we're looking at a relative performance of Pulte Homes versus the SPY. So the middle panel is the one we're going to focus on. This is a measurement of momentum. And what RSI is doing, if you don't really know, is it basically looks at a small period of time and says, what's the average up day and what's the average down day? Meaning, over time, when the stock closes higher, how much higher does it tend to go? When the stock closes lower, how much lower does it tend to go? And it's kind of a ratio of the average up day versus the average down day. It's actually how the indicator starts being calculated. Then it uses an exponential calculation. This is where the math gets a little bit tricky. But basically all you do is every day you have a new observation and you weight the RSI based on that new observation. And so instead of just looking at a rolling 14-day window, it's actually starting with 14 days and then starts adding on additional data. And that's an exponential average calculation, which a lot of technical indicators use because honestly, it's a much better way of tracking trends. Simple averages are just kind of smoothing out an entire data series, but weighting them all equally. Exponential calculations are weighted a lot more to the more recent data, so they tend to react much better to shifts in market conditions. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at Pulte Home, and you're seeing that the RSI is currently around 82. So what does that mean? When the RSI is above 70, it's considered overbought. And I always tell people overbought, basically it's gone too high too quickly. And what you'd likely expect, especially when it comes out of that overbought region, is a brief pullback, at least a brief pullback, right? Because basically the market's gotten a little ahead of itself and probably needs to pull back a little bit. When the market becomes oversold, like it did here in June of 2022, it means it's gone too low too quick. And most likely you'd expect a bit of an upside pullback as a result of that off of the lows. But here's the thing, right? Look at when the RSI was overbought most recently. It actually happened in June of 2023. And you can see that it briefly came out of that overbought region, but overall remained overbought for about a month. So that's the first thing I will tell you about working with the RSI indicator for a number of years. Is it's not just a moment, right? Becoming overbought is not just a point in time and then all of a sudden something different is going to happen. I always say overbought means up a lot. That just means a stock has gone up a lot. That's a good thing. That's kind of what we'd want, hopefully. If you own a stock, right, you want it to go up a lot. So the price getting, or the indicator getting overbought, the stock being in an overbought scenario, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just describes the price behavior up until that moment. It tells you it started moving up a lot. The real trick is what happens after that, right? And this is when you need to look for a couple things. Number one, when does the RSI come out of that overbought region? And what that usually means is, at the very least, you're going to get a pullback. Think of the RSI overbought, meaning a bunch of buyers have come in, and I'm talking just totally anecdotally now. A bunch of buyers come in and push the prices a little too far. You've always talked about leaning a little too far in front of your skis, and if you've skied before, that's kind of not a good thing, because you all of a sudden get going way too quickly, and you need to sort of lean back and lighten up a little bit, or you'll crash into something or somebody. So we're getting a little ahead of our skis here, and most likely that means even if the trend is going to continue, which in this case it did, it actually needs just a little brief pullback to sort of reset. This is where there's some profit taking. This is where the pace was obviously too quick, and it's going to be alleviated. That gives an opportunity for new buyers to come in. Maybe buyers that missed out on that initial upswing in Pulte homes now have an opportunity to buy back in this case, right around the 50-day moving average. That's what propels the stock to make that next big move higher. And what you have to remember is, stocks in a persistent or a consistent uptrend for many, many moons, it takes often a lot of overbought conditions and then alleviating and then overbought again. And that's actually characteristic of an extended uptrend. I'll show you a chart in a minute that has a great example of that. So if you look at what happened, it became overbought here and then pulled back. RSI remained above 40, which is really important to me, because 40 is sort of that lower end of a bullish range. In a bullish phase, the entire RSI kind of goes up a little bit. So the fact that we remained above 40 is pretty constructive here. Now, once again, we're overbought. So again, all that means is we've gone up a ton, and that's a good thing, right? If you're bullish in the space, what it means is to look for the conditions alleviating, right? The overbought condition to alleviate. And what that means is most likely you'll have, at the very least, a tactical pullback. The trick is what happens after that, right? After a pullback, which is pretty likely, what happens after that? Do you see signs of additional buyers come in? Do you stay above the RSI level of 40 on a pullback? Does the price find support at a previous low, or support at an ascending 50-day moving average, like Pulte Homes did in March of this year? So those are some of the things you would look for to just confirm that this is just a brief pullback within a longer-term uptrend, as opposed to something more significant, more of a rollover. The other thing you might want to look for is that next high, right? So you see in this condition here in December of 2021, the stock just barely became overbought, just touched the overbought region. It's not a big overbought condition, but it is technically overbought. Pull back. Then look what happened when the stock made a new high at the end of the year, and the RSI was actually not overbought. So that's the bearish momentum divergence, which we've talked about on this channel before. That's when price goes higher, but the RSI does not. And ideally, it's overbought the first time, not overbought the second time. So once you have that pullback from the overbought condition, it's really important to look what happens on the next move higher. Do we move higher and become overbought again, like we did right now with Pulte Homes? Or is it more like December 21, we're making a new high, but the RSI is not overbought? That was one of the great signals to me that the market was topping out at the end of 2021. That same pattern, that bearish momentum divergence, happened with the S&P 500, with a lot of other indexes, with the NASDAQ. They all had that condition of, making higher highs but weaker momentum. Now, having said that about the current conditions with Pulte Home, and I would say, again, the fact that it's overbought is not necessarily a bad thing. It just tells you that we've gone up a lot. It may mean that it's not a great time to chase this move because we're going vertical a little bit, but look for a pullback and then focus on what happens after that is the general way that I've found to approach that type of chart. Just as another example of how things can become overbought, and that's not a bad thing, is just look at Alphabet or innumerable stocks from sort of mid-2020 to late 2021. Look at how often Alphabet became overbought. Look at how you had those brief pullbacks. Look at how the RSI rarely got below 40 and then basically just reinitiated that uptrend. So when you have an extended bull market phase, those overbought conditions are not necessarily bad things. They might tell you that there's a good actionable pullback to focus on, right? And so that's when you see things being overbought, I often put it on a watch list as overbought names and just look to see what happens on the pullbacks. Look if there's an opportunity to get in and buy on the dips within a longer term uptrend. But also just recognize that every one of those overbought conditions, none of those are really bad things. All of those just keep confirming the fact that additional buyers are coming in and pushing the price higher. So once again, overbought means up a lot. I hope you found this discussion of RSI helpful. It's one of my favorite indicators to understand and really characterize price movements in a little more statistically relevant way. If you like this sort of thinking of technical analysis and behavioral finance, investor psychology, subscribe to my channel, give the video a thumbs up if you could, and put a comment below. What do you think about the home builder stocks that have had a pretty good run so far, but still one of the strongest groups in 2023? For Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well and stay safe. I'll talk to you again soon.